Unfortunately, it is inevitable every year, every draft season, you will find a couple of prospects that seem to not be able to keep themselves under control once the college football season is over until the NFL draft. They will go out there and put themselves in a bad situation or do something stupid that makes teams pause and hesitate and wonder what the hell this guy was thinking and bring up some additional questions about them when they already have questions about them heading into the NFL draft. And one of the guys that fits into this mold is Dak Prescott. Now, there are some people that like him as a prospect, some people that aren't as high on him. But when you sit there as, in particular, a quarterback prospect where you're looking at teams potentially someday maybe wanting to envision you as a future leader of the franchise or being somebody that could at least be a good representation of the organization. And then during the draft process, when you would think above all else the pressure would be on to be on your best behavior, the pressure would be on to make sure you dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's, managed your P's and Q's very well. Dak Prescott goes out and gets himself arrested for a DUI. I mean, that's just dumb. Just flat out dumb. It's reckless, it's irresponsible, and it's stupid. And, some teams may value it more than others in terms of its importance. For some teams that maybe already weren't that high on him as a prospect to begin with, this is probably the type of action, the type of behavior that will completely remove him off of certain teams' draft boards. And I certainly understand that. Because if a guy can't take the draft process seriously enough to the point where he avoids a stupid situation like this, what's to say that he wouldn't get into even more trouble once he actually gets some NFL money in his bank account? That's a fair question. And even for the teams that maybe do like him as a prospect, this has to give you some pause or reservation about just how high of a pick you want to invest in a guy who, during the time above all else, you would think, and basically when you're talking about a draft season, getting ready for the NFL draft, that is the equivalent of a contract year. That's what it is. It's your first contract year. You're trying to set your market. You're trying to get a price. It is your first chance at a contract year. So you really have to pause and hesitate about guys when they screw up in their contract year. And that's exactly what Dak Prescott did. Now, as I mentioned, in terms of him on the field as a prospect, I think there's a wide varying range of opinions. Some people think he can be a future NFL starter. Some people envision him maybe as a solid NFL backup to a low-level NFL starter. Some people envision him maybe as a fringe roster candidate or maybe even a guy you just carry on the practice squad. Maybe not even an NFL quarterback at all. There's a wide varying range of opinions, and I could see why people would come to any of those conclusions because when I look at his strengths, while he's only 6'2", 225 pounds, he is 225 pounds. He's built like a man. He's got really good muscle on his frame. He's got a really good build for the height that he has. So you wouldn't necessarily think you would have a ton of concerns about him being able to hold up at the NFL level. You're talking about a guy that is athletic enough when it comes to his feet, has pretty good mobility within the pocket, the ability to extend plays without automatically having to dash out of the pocket, but also a guy that can move his feet, who can gain yards with his feet, who can extend plays as a passer with his feet, and effectively throw on the move, both rolling out to the right and to the left. A guy that I really liked in 2015, how much he improved his field vision. Like looking at him on film in 2014, I'm like, oh, this guy is a one-read guy. He locks onto the primary. I don't know if he's ever going to grasp the concept of going through progressions, moving safeties, reading defenses before the snap. But I'll tell you, I was impressed by Dak Prescott's improvement in 2015 and in general his overall improvement throughout his career. But I really like quarterbacks that can see the field well. If you ever notice, that seems to be a common theme, a trend. The quarterbacks that I think see the field the best tend to be the prospects that I'm the highest on. And I like the growth in progression and improvement in his ability to go through his progressions and move his eyes in 2015. I thought he was really, really good. In terms of his throwing motion, I like at least half of his mechanics. I like his upper body body mechanics. I like the way he holds the ball. I like his release. In terms of his upper body movements and how he utilizes that in his throwing motion, I think is very good. And in general, you hear a lot of positive talk about Dak Prescott's work ethic. And I think when you watch the film, sometimes you can see work ethic based off of improvement, based off of effort within the game. And I always felt when I was watching Dak Prescott, I saw a guy who was working to get better, who was trying to improve. Hence what I was talking about, that improvement in his ability to go through his progressions and see the field and read defenses and move safeties with his eyes in 2015. So the film kind of validates that thought process. It's a guy that works really hard, is a pretty good leader on the field and in the locker room, the type of guy that other people would want to follow, a guy that can naturally lead others. I see that. So if you emphasize those traits, those strengths, you can sit there and say that this is maybe a guy that's worth a third-round pick or so because he's got some of those traits you like. He's not perfect, but he's got some good traits in some good areas. You see how much he's worked to improve. Now imagine you take away any of the time that is exhausted in terms of actually going to college classes, and you talk about devoting all of your energies to being an NFL player with a guy that already works hard. Imagine how much better he could get. I think it's a fair point. But, to me, maybe I'm just not as high on Dak Prescott as others. I don't really know. But I see a lot of questions. First and foremost, he is only 6'2", so height's going to be a little bit of an issue. Again, I don't think it's the be-all, end-all when it comes to a prospect, because you have guys that are 6'6" that suck. And you have guys like Russell Wilson that are 5'10" that could be franchise quarterbacks. Drew Brees, who's lucky to be 6 feet, and he's a franchise quarterback. You could have smaller guys be that dude. Aaron Rodgers is all of 6'2". Brett Favre was always only all of 6'2". 6'2" guys can be franchise quarterback. So you have some teams that are concerned about being 6'2" as opposed to 6'4" or 6'5". But at the end of the day, how much of a difference is that 2 or 3 inches really? I can see if Dak Prescott was maybe 5'10", 5'11", then I could understand it a little bit more, because that's a half foot of difference between that and maybe 6'5" or 6'6". But we're talking about a 2 or 3 inch difference from the standard of what you would want as a franchise quarterback. I don't think the height is that big of a concern. I think when it comes to physical skills and quarterback traits, that's where the bigger concerns come in. I don't see a guy with a very strong arm, and I don't see a guy whose arm strength has gotten a whole lot better over the past couple of years as a starter at Mississippi State. I really don't. I in particular have concerns about the farther you stretch him out in terms of having to throw down the field, how much more is that ball going to float? How much more inaccurate is he going to be, because he just lacks that natural arm strength? And even as I watched him sometimes, on the short and intermediate throws, I'm like, there's not a lot of zip on that ball. There's not a lot of fire on that ball. So I really wonder if he can fit it into tight throwing windows at the NFL level. I also have some major concerns about his accuracy too. Again, another area that I thought he got somewhat better at in 2015 compared to 2014, but not enough. I mean, there's still quite a ways to go there. I think both his accuracy in terms of throwing to general areas and also his ball placement were very, very lacking. Even sometimes on the move, like I talked about, he can extend plays with his feet, and he can move out of the pocket and still stay as a thrower. But there were times, man, he'd be sitting there and rolling out, and you'd see him throw a ball into the ground 3 yards in front of the wide receiver, 10 yards over their head. That's just a maddeningly inconsistent accuracy that can be very frustrating for an NFL head coach, an offensive coordinator, or quarterback coach, especially when especially those balls that are overthrown can potentially lead to easy, unnecessary interceptions at the NFL level. In terms of his throwing motion, I would like to see him work on his lower body mechanics. I think in part sometimes with that lack of natural arm strength, even though his upper body mechanics in general are pretty good, he really doesn't do a good job, especially sitting in the pocket, of consistently using his lower body in his throwing motion. And again, I talk about this when you talk about pitchers, or you talk about in golf. You want to get distance. People think you sit there and lift weights and you increase your club head speed by getting stronger in the upper body and swinging harder, and that's just not simply the case. I can speak from my own experience. When you get more rotation of your body and you get a better and quicker hip turn, that's when your club head speed improves exponentially, and as a result, your distance improves greatly immediately by utilizing your full body and really utilizing the strongest muscles in your body, which are in your lower body. It's the same thing with the throwing motion, just like it is in baseball. Your best power pitchers, a lot of times you look at them, like you think about Roger Clemens, before post-roids, doesn't matter. Dude always had incredibly muscular legs and really utilized his lower body well in his throwing motion. As a result, he could instantly, consistently, and easily throw in the upper 90s without causing a lot of stress on his body, because he utilized his entire body in his throwing motion, in particular utilized his lower body to great benefit. And I would like to see him utilize his lower body better in his throwing motion. Sometimes I wonder about his ability to handle pressure, whether it's coming from the outside or straight up the middle. At times he could get a little bit of happy feet. That's, again, where that lack of utilization of the lower body could come into play for a guy that already lacks arm strength. And then I come back to that DUI arrest, and I mean, it's just, you have to question it. And then when you throw in the fact, if you remember this past offseason, he got into that thing where he got beaten up off the field. You could say whether that was his fault or not. But again, it paints a picture, and you combine that with the DUI arrest, and you do have to start wondering, hey, is this a situation where this guy tends to get himself into bad situations? Is it sometimes where he makes bad decisions, or is it sometimes the bad decision is he's around other bad people or in bad situations that could potentially put him in trouble and put his availability to the team at risk? Fair question or not, I think it is a question. And I think once you get that DUI arrest, you open yourself up to it. So then you're going to have concerns about, is this guy going to have a substance abuse problem? Is he going to have an alcohol problem? And, fair or not, by doing what he did, he opened himself up to this. He has nobody but himself to ultimately blame. And when I look at Dak Prescott, I want to like him more as a prospect than I actually do. I just look at him and I say, yeah, he's a guy that can move some on his feet, but he doesn't move as well on his feet as you might think. He's not great on his feet. He's a tough kid. I think good leadership skills on the field and in the locker room, really good work ethic, and I've seen the effort to improve. I like the field vision improvement that he had in 2015, but again, that lack of arm strength, that lack of overall accuracy, the fact that he's not as good of an athlete as maybe you think he was based off of his results at college, I just look at him and I see a day 3 prospect, and I see a mid to late day 3 prospect. To me, Dak Prescott is really a 6th round talent. When you factor in the DUI arrest especially. I don't think that a DUI arrest alone should remove you completely off the board if you have certain draftable traits. And I do think Dak Prescott does have certain draftable traits. But when I look at the difference between him and, let's say, a Jacoby Brissett, just as one example in this draft class, Jacoby Brissett is bigger. I think he's more naturally gifted athletically. I also think he has better short and intermediate area accuracy and a much stronger arm, with some of the similar leadership and work ethic traits of a Dak Prescott. I want a guy like Prescott to succeed at the NFL level. Believe me, I really do. I just wonder if he's ever really going to find a niche, or he's ever really going to, get a chance. Because again, when we're talking about a lot of these guys being taken in day number 3, a lot of these NFL teams idiotically only take 2 quarterbacks onto their opening day rosters. So a lot of these guys maybe get stuck in the practice squad, or they go toil with somebody else. And there's just not the same emphasis placed on quarterback development as there once was, especially for these guys that are drafted in day number 3. So I really have concerns about whether Dak Prescott is ever really going to contribute anything at the NFL level. In terms of an overall talent standpoint, factoring in the DUI arrest, to me, he's a 6th round talent. If a team sat there and said, hey, we want to take a gamble on this kid, maybe we'll bring him in as a number 3, and maybe he develops into a solid number 2, maybe a low-level number 1, he's worth the gamble. But if you're a team that really values character, I guess that DUI arrest and other things make you wonder, but maybe it makes you wonder too much more than you should. But to me, my opinion, I've seen some of these comparisons where, especially heading into this season, it was like he was Tim Tebow. I'm like, nah, he was a better thrower than Tebow ever was at Florida. But when I start hearing people talk about him being a 2nd or 3rd round prospect, I'm just being honest. I say, whoa, pump the brakes, because the film reality just doesn't match that hype whatsoever. This is a mid to late day 3 prospect and nothing more, I promise you.